evening. I'm Jean Blake, and I join Chris Thrasher in welcoming you and thanking you for being with us tonight for our conversation and NFL Community Huddle, taking the goal line stand for your mind and body. We'd like to thank our host, the Satcher Health Leadership Institute here at the Morehouse School of Medicine. Now, our goal, as Chris said, is to have an informed conversation about mental health, and we understand that's a broad topic. We are going to be covering topics ranging from depression and dementia to the emotional and financial impact on people who live with mental illness and their families. We'll be addressing stigma head on, and also we will hopefully be discussing, and I imagine that we will be discussing, the potential relationship between sports-related injury and mental health disorders. Many of you come into this room with your own experiences with mental health. My mom lived with bipolar disorder, and almost until the day she died, even close relatives would tell her, "Come on, Mary, snap out of it." And we all know that you can't snap out of depression any more so than you can walk off the football field with a broken leg. Through education, we can increase understanding and therefore reduce the stigma that far too often still prevents people who need and deserve treatment from seeking it and receiving it.
Just as mental disorders affect the rest of the population, they affect athletes and their families. And sometimes, of course, because of the special challenges of professional athletics, and even college and high school, the competition, the need for teamwork, all of those things can be a real burden in terms of mental health. And then, of course, we know now that things that we used to take for granted, like concussions and other brain injuries, can in fact increase the risk of dementia. So early onset of dementia is one of the things that we're really concerned about in all sports. We have more information probably on boxing than anything else, but we now know that any sports that involve trauma to the head can increase the risk of brain disease, encephalopathy. And so we're here tonight to examine that, and I think the fact that the former NFL players are so willing to be involved and also so concerned about children and the rest of the population in terms of how can we improve mental health for everybody.
First of all, my grandmother and me, we had a really strange relationship. We were just really close. My grandmother had adopted me. Both my parents growing up were alcoholics. And I think, when I went through those hard times with my parents and stuff, it was really hard for me as a young kid. And I had my ups and downs. And my grandmother did identify, with me with me being depressed. But when my grandmother passed away, this was my rock. This was the person that had supported me ups and downs, and I just basically, lost control. I didn't know if I was going or coming.
Well, you resisted treatment. What happened is that you really disappeared from the game of basketball. You didn't go to practice, and your teammates would call you, and you wouldn't answer the phone. You just simply stopped going to play basketball, and you were with the Mystics at the time.
Yes.
And so tell us about sort of what that part of the experience was, because you didn't even know what was going on, which is quite typical.
I just had so many thoughts going through my head. I was really sad because, I no longer had my grandmother. I had no energy. I just didn't want to be there. I just wanted to go, be in my apartment at the time and just sulk, just a pity party. At the same time, I can feel like these mixed emotions. I just felt like I had no control over Shamiqua, and it was a time in which I really had to try to find myself. I was just really lost.
When your loved one has dementia or Alzheimer's, one of the first signs is the revelation that they have a lack of personal hygiene. Even a person who has been so clean and pristine before, such as my husband was. So showering became a problem. And I thought, I've got to find a way to get him to take a shower to make the task easier for me. I soon discovered that anything mandated by the NFL worked for John Mackey. So I came up with NFL Shower Day. What else? And now it's NFL Shower Day for retired players. That made the task work like a charm. Now, also with the disease, all of these things get worse and worse after a while. So then I had to say that Paul Tagliabue, who was the commissioner then, was offering a check for any retired players for $1,000 who would take a shower that day. John had a lot of respect for Paul Tagliabue, so that worked like a charm. Another problem that we don't really want to talk about is incontinence. That is coming if you're dealing with someone with Alzheimer's and dementia. But I prepared early. I bought the adult underwear for him. I brought the package in. I said, honey, look what the NFL sent. He opened the package. He took them out. He said, I got to try this on. I said, that's right. He tried it on. He went over to the mirror. He turned from side to side, and he looked at me, and he said, these are nice. Another problem solved.
It became a badge of honor to go into the game and hit somebody so hard that you rung their bell or your bell was rung, which is an episode of a concussive episode. And that's what it was, and it's still like that today. Well, in 1989, I had sustained a couple of concussions in professional football, had a great athletic trainer and a great medical staff, I might add it, at the Buffalo Bills, who I really felt were concerned for my long-term health. I also had a wife and a one-year-old at the time who said, if you don't figure out a solution to this problem, we don't want you to play that game anymore, even though it was providing a good living. And I think many athletes, many of you guys here today that came out to support with the Retired Players Association have faced those similar issues. So in 1989, I had a couple incidences, and our trainer, Eddie Abramowski, had been with the Buffalo Bills since 1960, had a friend in Erie, Pennsylvania, who had developed this product. Now, the Pro Cap, all it is a cap. I don't know why he called it the Pro Cap, maybe because the pros were wearing it. It's a softer padded cap that fit on top of a standard helmet. And in this, although this looks, it's a lot bigger in circumference than a normal helmet, it still looks like a normal helmet, except when you put it on a little guy like me, it looks a little bit bigger. But talk about stigma, the original model did not look anywhere near this. Let me tell you one more story. I put that helmet on for the first time. I went out to practice that afternoon, and Jim Kelly was behind the center, and he was barking out signals, and he took a look up at the free safety, who was me at the time. He couldn't continue barking out his signals. He started laughing so hard. He said, that looks ridiculous. And I said, but I can't play if I don't wear it. So I said to him, I went home that night after practice, and you know, I felt like I was a 14-year-old teenager schoolboy getting teased by my peers. But it was Bruce Smith and Andre Reed and Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas. So I went home and I said to my wife, she said, how did it go today? And I said, honey, you're not gonna, it was really bad. I said, I felt like a 14-year-old again, getting teased in middle school. And she said, it can't possibly be that bad. She said, how bad can it be? And if you don't wear it, Abe said you can't play, and I don't want you to play if you don't wear it. So I said, come on, I'm gonna take you over to the locker room, and I'm gonna show you what this helmet's like. So I took her over to the locker room about 10:30 that night, and I put the helmet on, and I came out into the locker area, and she looked at it, and she fell on the ground laughing. She thought it looked so ridiculous. The sad part about that story is, and I was probably not unlike most players in here today, players will they will choose fashion and coolness over protection every single time, at every level of the game.
Well, little did I know that also in my family, and I had a great childhood, but in my family, we had mental health issues in my family. We never talked about it. So not only did we not talk about things in my sport, but we also didn't talk about things at home. My mother, who would have her spells, and that's exactly what we called it. My father would say, she's having one of her spells. We'd have my aunt who would come and visit 1 week out of the summer every year. Now, she didn't talk to us very much. She had this glazy-eyed look, and she would just want to hold your hand. You know, and so my mom would assign one of his kids, you go hold Aunt Joanne's hand today. So we had that rotation going on, but we really never knew what was wrong with her. Not until later on in life did I find out that she suffered from schizophrenia, and she'd come out as they released her from the institution, and she'd come out and stay with us for a week. So those things weren't talked about. And in fact, not talking about those things became a huge barrier for me getting help, because when I saw my son start going through these things and started exhibiting every classical symptom you can possibly think of, from not being able to sleep, from also starting withdrawal from his friends. His grades started going down. the isolation, eating problems, appetite problems, inability to concentrate, not feeling well, aches and pains, didn't feel like he could go on anymore, felt like he was a burden to the family. All those things were happening to him, and yet I recognized him because I'd gone through them. So I recognized him, but I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know what it was. And so that mentality stepped up again and says, you know what, you'll get through this. I did. You know, hey, I played 10 years in the NFL. You'll get through it, you will. And not even thinking about my own bumps and travels along the way. Even at Utah State University, when I slept through a whole quarter, I couldn't get out of bed. But it was the weather. It was something else. It wasn't this thing that has a name. And so not knowing how that name, that stigma that stood in place for me reaching out and getting an education I probably should have to what was going on with me, it was part of life. How would I be supposed to know that was any different? And that stigma that keeps us from reaching out and getting that education to what's going on eventually led to the point where I wasn't there at the right time, in the right place, and he took his life.
I'm so grateful to be here today. You know, when I got the email, you know, every time I look into my email, when I see from Ms. Jackson, I just want to broaden my knowledge because I work with the geriatrics, you know, with Alzheimer's and dementia, and I have a support group for the last 10 years. So what I did was to relocate to Nigeria. Like I said, I just come just to broaden my own knowledge. But today, I thank Almighty God because I came. My son is a football player, but now I'm now getting the diagnosis on my own today. My son, from college to college, brilliant football player. You know, I don't know how you call defend or I don't know all those football. He plays very well. Everybody cheers him up in the field. Now my son will sleep with everything you talk about. Lonely, sleepless night. I come back as a nurse, I say, Lord, this is depression. He will not listen to me. He will not take treatment. But I thank Almighty God I was here today. Maybe you did this because of me.